In 1991, Bud Hopkins and I decided to find out how many people have had abduction experiences in the United States at least. In order to do that, we went to a national polling organization, the Roper Institute, the Roper Poll, and we asked 6,000 Americans whether they had experiences that abductees say that they have had before they knew they were abductees, like traveling on the astral plane or seeing unusual lights in their room or having missing time episodes and things like that. We asked 10 questions. Ultimately, we found that 2% of the American people, at the very least, have had experiences that abductees have had before they knew they were abductees. Of course, each one has to be examined individually to see whether they've had abductions or not. But it's an awful lot of people, and it suggests that the phenomenon is extremely widespread everywhere.
I've been interested in the boundaries of human consciousness for quite a few years, and yet when I first heard about this phenomenon through a colleague of mine who told me about Bud Hopkins and his work, I thought this was some kind of madness, and so it was a gradual process of talking with him, of seeing these cases, and realizing that I had no explanation as a psychiatrist of what people who are now called abductees or anomalous experiencers were undergoing. It behaved like real experience, and so the question then became, what is going on?
Patterns began to emerge, and up until the time I started doing this work, I don't think people were paying attention to any particular sets of patterns as they emerged in the investigations that were underway. I got very interested in that issue. What were the similarities from case to case? Because that helped establish that we were dealing with some kind of rather definite, precise external phenomenon rather than just the complete range of human fantasy. If you've got patterns that are very tight, the idea of fantasy is probably very much weakened at that point. First of all, an abduction can happen to one person or two or three. I've got cases involving 7 people at once. But let's say first a nighttime visitation, which is very typical. Let's say a man and woman are asleep, and the man wakes up. He doesn't know why he's wakened up, and realizes that he's paralyzed and absolutely cannot move. And he's quite terrified, doesn't know what's happening, cannot alert his wife, who seems totally oblivious, sound asleep. We use the term switched off. At some point he becomes aware of a figure in the room, or several figures. Either they approach the bed or they're standing by the window or whatnot. He next finds himself levitating off the bed. He will find himself then floating usually towards the window. Let's say it's a closed window, and he and the small figures float through the closed window. This is not an out-of-body experience. If he looks back to the bed, if he can see back to the bed, he's not in the bed. He's gone. He floats out the window, and there's usually outside some kind of intense light, which functions as some sort of tractor beam or whatever we want to call it, and the person and the figures are floated up into the craft. He floats up into the craft, usually through an opening in the bottom, and finds himself very often immediately on a table without his clothes. Very few people remember the act of either disrobing or being disrobed. He's on a table, and a series of medical procedures, quasi-medical procedures, then are undertaken. They end up very often focusing on the genitals. If it's a male, very often some kind of instrument is placed around the penis. Very often at that point, either painfully or through some kind of induced climax, a sperm sample is taken. Very often probes are inserted in the nostril or ear. There are a series of other procedures that happen very frequently. Sometimes nerve centers are stimulated and various muscle groups will move. We don't know why any of this happens. The person can be shown some things. Very often can be shown a small child or a baby. Even men are shown these strange hybrid offsprings, and then eventually the person is returned the same way he came back to bed. often dropped from a certain height onto the bed, still not disturbing the wife, and immediately goes to sleep. In the morning, wakes up, has no idea what happened. Is this a dream? Very often we'll find his pajamas on the floor next to the bed. Doesn't remember having taken them off. Very often he will notice pain or odd sensation in a certain part of his body and finds a small mark. Now, that's a typical kind of nighttime visitation. We have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these cases.